Hi, welcome to Nourishment at Noon. I'm David McNinsky, one of the pastors at Manchac United Methodist Church, and each weekday, one of us from Manchac is here with you to hopefully provide nourishment at this noontime. Tomorrow, Mark Hickson will be with us. On Wednesday, I'll be back. Thursday, Kim Carroll. And on Friday, Pastors Chanson and Jason Esparza. Tell you the truth, I almost didn't make it today to be with you. And it's not because I had some sort of post-Easter weariness or letdown, though that does in fact sometimes happen. It isn't even because I've run out of things to say. You know, I can always think of something. But actually, it's because of something I found in my box. I was up on Good Friday at the church office to film our service, and I found a fax in my box from a law firm in Canada. This is amazing and wonderful news. That apparently, according to this fax from this law firm, I have a relative that I probably never even heard of named Alan, and he passed away tragically in an accident 9 years ago. But he had left an insurance policy worth $10,820,000. Now, you only have 10 years to collect on this, and he died 9 years ago. So this wonderful law firm reached out to me to help me collect this money. Now, what they plan to do is give 10% of it to charity, and who doesn't like charity? And then the other 90%, I get to split with the lawyer. Sounds pretty good, so I went ahead and informed my group on Friday night that I might not be back with them Easter Sunday or the next day. And they laughed, and I laughed because actually, I think we all sort of doubted that I was going to come into $10 million. And part of the doubt was, first of all, I noticed that, McNinsky's kind of an unusual name. I don't know all of my relatives, but I know a number of them, and all of them would have capitalized the N, which this letter did not capitalize. I also know that I've got 3 other siblings, and none of them have been contacted yet. And so even if I'm the only one, I'm going to have to split. So my part of the 90% is already going down. I'm going to have to share it with them. And then actually, my wife has been part of something like this before for real, where they were trying to find a descendant of a relative that she had that died. And the letter we got looked a whole lot different than this one looked to us. So I had my doubts. So as soon as I got home after the Good Friday service, I went and Googled in $10 million scam Canada. And sure enough, this came up. A different law firm, but similar in form. What they do is a website that's close to the law firm's website, but just slightly different. A phone number that's off by a digit as they imitate these lawyers. And they had sent one of these things to the business editor of the Los Angeles Times. Wrong person to send it to, so he chased them down and responded with them. Because all they say is, no obligation, you just need to give us your contact information. So he called them, talked to them, and of course found out that it was a scam. So now I have to try to figure out, how am I going to respond to this scam? I thought of a couple of possibilities. I don't know if you like either one of these, but one is I thought I would tell them, wow, this sounds great, and but I need to let you know that I have 3 other siblings, and we'd like to come up to Toronto and talk with you about this. So if you could send us $400 a piece for round-trip airfare, and then about $500 a piece for a night in a motel. If you would send us that $2,000, $3,000, let's say $3,000 in Visa gift cards, we'll be glad to come up and talk with you about this, and you can just take it out of our inheritance. Of course, the other possibility I thought of was I could say, wow, this really sounds great. $10 million is a lot of money. You know, I think it could help this Nigerian prince I've heard of who needs money so he can access wealth that's coming to him in the future. Well, my point in all this is it was a good thing, of course, that I didn't go further and that I doubted this possibility. Doubt is an important part of our life, and too often it is, I think, maligned. Think of the story of doubting Thomas. After Easter, Jesus appears in a room to a number of the disciples, except Thomas, And when they tell Thomas about it later, he says, I won't believe it unless I see him and I can touch him. And so sure enough, Jesus comes and appears. But notice this, when Jesus does appear and asks Thomas if he wants to go ahead and touch his wounds and examine them, Thomas's response was no, and he falls on the floor and he says, my Lord and my God. I've often thought Thomas gets sort of a bad rap. Also because doubt is an important part, I think, of faith. Doubt is not the opposite of faith. I think doubt is an important step on the road to authentic faith. For unexamined, untested faith will not stand in a crisis. It's more magical belief than it is, I think, actual faith. I think of some quotes that have helped me through the years. First, from the great Albert Einstein, who said, I wouldn't give much, he said, for simplicity on this side of complexity, but simplicity on the other side of complexity is very valuable. In other words, I think he's saying that faith, simple faith, without ever examining it, isn't worth much. But if you come to a simple faith after a long process of examination, it's worth a great deal. Another writer, the late Madeline Nongel, put it this way. She said, a faith that in a God that doesn't have any doubt and doesn't have any hint of uncertainty is more like faith in an idea and not in faith in the real God. I think the real God understands and expects that there will be questions and there will be doubts. The great Elie Wiesel, whose memoir of his time in a concentration camp, Night, is certainly read all over the country, even to this day, by high school students and other students, says this. He said, a heart that is broken is actually a stronger heart. And a faith, he said, that's been wounded is actually a more solid faith. And the breaking and the wounding often comes as we ask our questions. And so I'm not encouraging you today, in the midst of this crisis, to have faith without doubt. I'm encouraging you to have doubt and to ask questions. But the difference is, don't let your doubts scare you off and send you someplace else. Let your doubts bring you closer to the Christian community so we can ask and explore those questions together. I remember some years ago, a church where I was pastor had just opened a new sanctuary, and I was meditating in it one day and thinking of the long journey to build that sanctuary and all the forces that had opposed the building of it and had personally insulted me from time to time. And I thought about that, and I was thinking about, quite honestly, revenge. And I was hoping they'd be exposed for the people that they showed themselves to be in that process. And I had to admit this to a friend later, and I said, I was sitting in our new church and I was having fantasies of revenge on people. And he laughed. He said, I can't think of a better place to have those than in church. So take even your doubt and your difficulties. Don't take them away. Take them closer to God and to God's people. I'm reminded of the story that Elie Wiesel tells of being in a concentration camp. One night, the Jews in the camp decide to put God on trial. So one is appointed to be the judge to monitor the trial. One is to be the defense attorney, and one is to be the prosecutor. And the prosecutor goes first, and for hours, he lists all the time, biblically and since then, when the Jews have been mistreated and hurt and scattered throughout the earth, and how God had not seemed to be there to help them. And as he's just reaching the crescendo of his indictment of God, the moderator calls time and says, we'll hear more about this later. He said, but right now, gentlemen, it's time to stop and have our prayers. It's okay to argue. It's okay to doubt. But please don't forget to have your prayers.